Hi, my name is in Houston, Texas with Powers Law Group. It is Friday, February 16, 2018. And today we're doing our Facebook Live a little later today because I was at the State Bar Advanced Immigration Conference earlier on. So this week, a lot of news, and also we went to some asylum training and USCIS and asylum liaison meetings this week. So there's just a lot of updates about what's going on. So my theme is basically change and updates, but we do take questions. So here on our number, 713-589-2085. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call at 713-589-2085. And you can also, make sure they don't, you can also ask a question on our Facebook Live chat spot so that we will take any of those questions. And you can email throughout the week and we'll collect them. So we'll be doing this again next Friday at 11, which is next Friday is, let me get my trusty calendar, the 23rd. So this week we have lots of different things that happen, and happy Valentine's Day, by the way. Hope you had a nice Valentine's Day this week. On one thing that happened was the ICE detains more than 100 in Los Angeles area immigration raids. We've been hearing a lot about a lot of different raids. I think there was another one in like Seattle as well, so a lot on the West Coast recently. And we've been notified that there will be a lot more labor enforcement raids, but this did happen. So I mean, this is another reminder, if this is going to be our new normal, that we need to make sure that people are prepared to have an experienced immigration attorney consult beforehand and be able to react quickly. The other important thing to know is to know your rights as to what you can say and what you don't need to say in a situation like that. And also to have your whole family have a plan. Have your family know what to do, who to call, and how to go about that. In other news, an ICE lawyer, this was on Valentine's Day, in Seattle, was charged with stealing immigrant IDs. About 7 people, he stole their identities, and he resigned on Monday. So, wow. He, I guess, apparently was making accounts with credit cards and things like that. So that happened this week. Another thing that I've been hearing a lot through, we also talked about this last week about the vetting center that President Trump had requested be made within the next 6 months. So that was announced sometime in the last week, I believe it was. But that seems in line with a lot of initiatives of sharing databases and communicating because of some other research I've been doing. So don't forget that that's happening. But another thing that I've been hearing a lot recently on some of the forums is the interpretation by the immigration judges of, I should have practiced saying this before getting online, matter of USCIS, which was decided February 2nd, 2018, which is 27 INN DC 207 BIA 2018. So this one basically says that when deciding a bond, immigration judge should consider the nature and circumstances of the alien's criminal activity, including any arrests and convictions, to determine if the alien is in danger to the community, but family and community ties generally do not mitigate an alien's dangerousness. And 2, that driving under the influence is a significant adverse consideration in determining whether an alien is a danger to the community in bond proceedings. So what we've been seeing this last week, I've been noticing on forums, because I've been in conferences, meetings this week, but judges have been denying bond for one DUI or one DWI in many cases for people who have cancellation of removal cases. So do not drink and drive, and do know that this is a change This is decided February 2nd, so that was only 2 weeks ago, and we're already seeing it applied in force. The other thing that we have, and I think I'll talk about that towards the end a lot, well, there was, ICE was planning to detain a father of a boy who had leukemia, but they eventually gave him a 1-year stay of deportation on a humanitarian basis, which honestly it's really hard to get some type of prosecutorial discretion or humanitarian stay. So that happened this week. He was holding himself up in a church. He took refuge in a Phoenix church. His son had leukemia, and he just found out that he won't be deported right now this next year. While he'll be able to stay and help with his family. And there was another thing, and I don't remember if we talked about it already, but there was a change in the Foreign Affairs Manual, and it basically said in the public charge manner, which is where they talk about if a person is taking advantage of food stamps or benefits or something, government benefits, and whether or not they'll be able to take care of themselves, if you will. That's more of a basic explanation of it. Then they will not look at just the I-864 at the consulates, but they will also look at the totality of the circumstances. So this was put in the Foreign Affairs Manual recently, looking at age, profession, skills of the person. So we're not really sure how that's going to be applied, but that looks like it was changed about a month ago. And sometimes we're seeing Foreign Affairs Manual being changed with very little, well, it's actually very common right now, without very little warning or notice, and somebody just notices that there's a different one, and then an article comes out about it. So we're not sure how that is going to come into play, but now the idea is that the I-64, which is the affidavit of support, will just be one piece of the whole picture. The other thing that came out this week was that, and this happens every middle of the month, the March Visa Bulletin came out. And so you can look at USCIS, you can look at the Visa Bulletin, DOS, and you can find out what the new Visa Bulletin says for March, and see how the visas are moving along. There's been a lot of talk about immigration reform, and in many cases, some of the family preferences have been discussed of getting rid of maybe the fourth preference, the brother, sister, or the adult child of a legal permanent resident unmarried. So, another concept thought out there is for people to, if you were thinking about petitioning for somebody and you just haven't done it for whatever reason, we don't know, and I don't want to start rumors, but they might get rid of some of these visas, right? Because they've also talked a lot about getting rid of the diversity visa, so to free up visas for others. So anyway, just keep that in mind, because there could be, you might want to file for somebody if you were meaning to do it, but you didn't know when and you just kept putting it off. We don't know how long all of these visa categories are going to be available. And then along those lines, the Senate, what day was that? Was it Thursday? I think today's Friday. I think it was Thursday. The Senate was in talks about an immigration bill, but was halted due to a White House threatened to veto. So that happened. And in other news, today is Friday, which is before the long weekend because Monday is President's Day and a federal holiday. The Supreme Court is meeting behind closed doors to discuss what to do with the DACA litigation. And many think that they will push it down to the lower court to make a decision. But we expect some type of news sometime soon, because in many cases there's the deadline of March 5th, and it's already February 16th. So there's still some litigation going on there. But what's really important to know if you have DACA is that if you've already had DACA and you were up for renewal, and if you are within 150 days of renewal, you can still renew. so you should do that immediately if that applies to you and you still qualify. So you can still do DACA renewals. There was a lot of news this week when there was a decision by one of the courts, I believe is in New York or New Jersey, but basically it said that there was a lot of misinformation and people thought that you could do a new DACA, but you can't. You can only do a renewal. So, but we'll find out more later on when we hear from the Supreme Court as well. And then another thing that came out this week was the USCIS is going to start taking credit cards for lots of the forms. So they're going to have an extra form where you can complete your information about the credit cards. So that, that's a pretty good thing for people because maybe they don't have the filing fee because the fees went up about a year ago, and a 485 is like $1,225. An I-130 is $535. So to be able to put on a credit card, just much like what happens with people who pay our legal fees, it's a lot easier for people to be able to do that more quickly. So we'll start seeing that go into play. And then I guess the last few things to talk about were we were able to, a couple of another attorney and myself went to an asylum training this week, and it was really good. It was put on by the nonprofits in town as well as an attorney from the West Coast, and we got some really great insight on preparing asylum cases, which we do a lot already, but it's always great to learn. And the same day, I went to the asylum office for USCIS Asylum AILA, which is the American Immigration Lawyers Association Liaison meeting. And one of my key takeaways from the asylum liaison meeting is that memo that came out, technically it was January 29th, that said our new priority for processing is we're going to get rid of that visa asylum bulletin. We're not going to use that anymore. And we're going to give the three priorities are: one, anybody who's rescheduled their asylum interview, we're going to give you an interview first. Two, and we've already seen that on one of our cases, we've already have an interview scheduled after that memo. And two is we're gonna always be giving interviews probably within about 21 days to anybody who applies. And then three, go to the backlog. So the way they explained it at the asylum office was that if everybody who applies right now, they're just going to keep giving them interviews. The idea is that they think a lot of people are applying fraudulently, and that the number of asylum applications will reduce. And then they'll only be giving interviews to those who really are serious and not fraudulent. And that's the theory behind it. But at the same time is, what if the receipts, which is what they call asylum applications, just are at a steady pace that is at the same level in which they can actually process interviews? Then that would mean it would be very hard for them to go backwards to the backlog, which already exists, right? So, this is great news for all the people who have a really strong case and really didn't want to wait 3 or 4 years for an interview. You might not be able to get a work authorization before you get a decision. But this can be very bad news for people who've been waiting like 3 or 4 years for an interview. Now, there's lots of possibilities potentially for an expedited interview request if you meet the qualifications, which is a case-by-case basis. And there's also, they said that they were going to allocate a certain percentage, which they don't know how much, to going through the backlog. So basically, they'll keep filing, giving interviews to everybody who files, and then slowly but surely they could go backwards to people who filed before January 8th, and so on. And then maybe in a few months, I don't know, maybe a year or so, maybe we'll be into December's applications. I'm not really sure, but since we do a lot of asylum here at Powers All Group, we're going to be keeping an eye on that processing time so we can help guide our clients with best advice. And I forgot what else I learned from that meeting, but it was really good. And I just think that anybody who applies is going to have to be ready, because the other thing they mentioned was that if you want to supplement your application, you need to turn it in 2 weeks before the interview. But if you submit your application and you get an interview in 3 weeks, then basically you only have about 1 more week before you can actually before you supplement. But they definitely prefer having a supplement. The other thing is we attended the USCIS Liaison meeting for Houston Field Office, and my associate attended, and her notes include that they're taking in some new business practices, and there's several new pilot programs being implemented basically to try to fight the backlog, to decrease the backlog, and they're expanding staff and space and continue to hire, and there will be a lot more interviews scheduled soon. And the current processing times for naturalization in the Houston area are about 1.5 years. And actually, I think today we've got 2 of our naturalizations that we've been waiting 14 months scheduled. Adjustments are 13 to 14 months, which has been steady for about a year or so to that number. And I-751s are taking over 1 year. I'll continue to give an update about that liaison meeting. And one of the other things was that the I-751s, most people should expect an interview, which is different from before. Normally it was only if the people had were not still together, or if there was abuse or divorce. And then parole in place there's no set processing time. So that is part of the news from that meeting. And then the other thing to talk about is that I went to the State Bar Advanced Immigration Conference. I spoke today on advanced citizenship issues. So being at the conference for the last 2 days, great speakers, great camaraderie between the immigration bar, sharing information, and basically there's just a lot of change everywhere. Foreign affairs manuals, policies, memos, case law. That's why we started doing this news update podcast. It also helps me to sit down and read everything and take it all in. That being said, I think it's very, very dangerous to go to somebody who's not an immigration attorney, who's not an attorney, and maybe someone who doesn't do immigration majority of the time, and who's not keeping up with all the changes. Even with a firm with 3 attorneys and maybe 10 or so staff total, we still have a lot of work to do to keep up to date with everything. So the bottom line there is, like, you need to go to somebody experienced who's keeping up to date with all the changes and going to conferences and reading, because your case could be affected by any one of these little changes. Could have a big impact on people's cases. We continue to hope for some type of immigration reform, and so that's why we need to all be calling our senators and congressmen and the White House, as well as different forms of advocacy for registering to vote, voting if you're eligible, op-eds, articles, calling friends, getting people involved. In locally in Texas, we've got the election day on March 6th, which is coming up, and right now, and early voting starts on February 20th. And I am a big supporter of DREAM Act, which is why I have my new mug here. So you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. So I am in support of the dreamers, and you should be too. So I think that's a lot of stuff right there. But we're continuing to review, learn, try to be the best immigration attorneys we can to help our clients. And so we might not have answered a lot of questions today, but because there was a lot of news and a lot of updates and changes. But we will continue to take questions and have questions and answers with themes ready for you every week. And towards our conclusion, unless there's any other questions, we do have some events coming up. On next, I believe it is on Tuesday, February oopsie, let me think. We're doing the waiver webinar. What time is it at? It's on Tuesday, February 20th, I believe, in the afternoon. It'll be in the afternoon. I'm gonna be talking about provisional waivers, and the other thing is that there was a recent delegation of immigration. Can you find out the time? I think it's like 3 or 4. But we will be. I recently spoke with somebody who did a tour of Ciudad Juarez, the embassy, so I'll be also talking about that in the provisional waiver webinar, which will be next Tuesday afternoon. And so just look for that online, but that will be live so we can take questions, and also be recorded so we can post it on the internet later. So that'll be about provisional waivers. The other thing is that I'll be speaking on waivers at South Texas College of Law on the 21st, and I will be in New Jersey and available if anybody would like a presentation on waivers, asylum, or anything the week of February 25th to March 1st. And I think that is about it. So thank you very much for watching. We'll be with you again next week. If you have any questions throughout the week, feel free to email us at contact@rubypowerslaw.com. Call us at 713-589-2085. And again, this is Ruby Powers with Powers Law Group. Have a great weekend.